Hey, what's going on, everybody? Alex Lyons here, Creative Director of the South Carolina Baptist Convention, and thanks for being a part of another episode of Let's Talk. This is a weekly call where we gather together worship and music leaders from out the great state of South Carolina and media, tech, and communication people as well, especially during this time so that we can share resources, share information. And today, I'm really excited for our guest is South Carolina's own, now in a new area, is Matthew Brown. Matthew Brown's been a pastor. He does tech stuff. He's got a lot of irons in the fire. Matt, thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man, there.
Alex, thank you. It is so cool to be with you guys, and just an honor to even be able to speak into some of the questions that people have. So I've been married 11 years to my wife, Kelly. We have two kids, my 7-year-old daughter, Ruby, and my 3-year-old son, Judah, that we adopted from India. So love my kids. They are just crazy. My daughter, Ruby, is into unicorns and panda bears and all things sparkle and glitter. And my son, Judah, is into cars, fast cars. He loves any type of cars and watching cars on YouTube videos and all that. So super fun. I didn't grow up in church, actually. I met Jesus as a senior in college at a BCM, Baptist Collegiate Ministry. And it was not long after that that Kendall Danford at Francis Marion University kind of invited me to be on the BCM team as a semester missionary. And that's really how I got my ministry start. I met my wife through a BCM, got inspired to adopt through BCM. I mean, just completely changed our lives and the trajectory of our lives. So I'm really grateful for how God used that ministry. And then I ended up taking a job at a church called The Rock. It was a small, brand new church, just gotten off the ground in Conway, South Carolina, where I really spent 12 to 13 years of my life working there and fulfilled every role imaginable, from starting as a youth pastor to a college campus pastor to an interim lead when our founding pastor passed away, to planning churches and opening coffee shops and doing online church and you name it. So just a ton of hats through there. So been kind of a crazy journey. And then God said, hey, I need you to move to Nashville. And we had no idea why. And we kind of left everything to move to nothing. And here I am at Brentwood Baptist, just south of Nashville, Tennessee, working as a web developer for them and helping do digital strategy for online church.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah, I mean, having a heart as a pastor, first, and being able to serve in that capacity, in a variety of roles, but then also obviously having the knowledge of talking about, how, online church and kind of, as a developer, we call it the Christian developer Vortex. Like there's tons of graphic designers, there's tons of video producers. You start, hey, a developer, somebody who can actually like code or something like that. And that kind of becomes this vortex. So just talk to me a little bit about, those kind of two sides, man, that pastoral side and this just kind of that tech side, and how they converge, and just obviously, we, sometimes, tech people and communications people and creatives and pastoral staff don't necessarily speak the same language. I think they have the same vision and desire to go, but there's conflict there. So just talk to me about how, how you wear both sides of those hats, and just how, maybe, each of those sides could, maybe do better at communicating to one another.
Yeah. And I'll give you a little background of how I ended up at the job at Brentwood. I think it'll explain some of that. Is, I never imagined myself being in this type of role. When we moved to Nashville, we were looking for pastor jobs, and there were a few that we thought, okay, these are the jobs that are going to happen. And they didn't, just kind of didn't make sense why we didn't get any of the roles that we were looking for. And so I sort of pried my hands open and said, okay, God, if it's not going to be a pastor role, well, here's some other things I'm good at. Like I can design websites and I can do technology. So I'll start applying for those jobs, and lo and behold, that's where I got a job. And even through all of my interviews at Brentwood, all the way up the rung, my interviewers kept saying, "Wow, this is really weird that you're a pastor, but you're taking a web developer job. Like, why do you think that is?" And I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea why God is trying to merge these two worlds together. So even my bosses just kept saying, "Well, we'll see what God has in store." Well, funny enough, COVID hits and everybody wants to do church online. And all of a sudden, this thing in me that's always been a tension is now coming together, because I grew up for so long going, okay, I have this tech, really nerdy, really geeky side of me, but I have a pastor ability and able to preach and teach and shepherd, but they just didn't seem to mesh together for the majority of my life. So I really downplayed the geeky stuff. And it was like, well, I help people with their computers, but and we'll help live stream. Because for whatever reason in the church world, up till now, at least my experience has been, if somebody comes with some tech nerdy abilities, we kind of just throw them into the production team and say, well, that is where God wants you to be. The pastorate is not your calling. It seems like all the techie people go to production. And I think what we're finding is now we have the perfect opportunity to kind of invite some of those people into, you're not just here for the production of the ministry, but you're here really to help us do the ministry and actually disciple people using your gifts and ability. So now my wife and I have laughed and started to say, wow, it seems like God had a plan for your life all along. That's a part of his greater plan. He knew this was coming, and boom, here we are. So I would say, to answer your question of some of the tension between techs and creatives or pastors and creatives is just what I experience. It's kind of this idea that all the techie people, you sit over here, all the kind of pastory people, you sit over here. But I think what the encouragement I would give now is, now we have an opportunity to bring those worlds together. And for pastors specifically, I would speak to, because I've sat in those shoes for a lot of years, is to not discount and discredit those people and say, well, you play too many online video games, or you just play too much with your computers or whatever. It's like, no. Now it's time to invite them in and say, you're actually better at online community than I am. So help me learn from you so that I can do that a little bit better. I would love to see that happen with those two worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ability to pastor online, it's that pastoring and shepherding and building community online. It's not just the technical knowledge of, like, as you said, you're the tech guy, you're the thing. I mean, I even say that myself. I make that delineation where I feel called to be a Gutenberg, and I'm not a Luther. And so I
Right.
will help partner myself, versus maybe there's a person who has a skill set that is, they're able to teach and shepherd and pastor, but they also have it utilizing tools that are conducive of the environment we live in now. I would say, just talking, obviously, with COVID and with that pastoral heart, and obviously streaming and everything online and all that, like, how then, to those who are using, a lot of people are using these tools, and you can talk about engagement, and you talk about views, and you talk about watch minutes and all this
Oh
other stuff.
yeah.
But even more than that, like, how do you have like a church online, or how do you have an online community, and how do you like pastor through the digital medium that you can't, obviously you can't touch face to face? Just how do you do that? Just you wearing those two hats, understanding the tech, but also understanding
Sure.
the store. How do you have online church or pastor
Yeah.
online?
Well, let me start by saying there's no just perfect answer at the moment.
Sure.
But the beauty of this season is there's almost no wrong answer at the moment, is because none of us have ever been here. None of us have ever tried this. There's no churches that are actually winning at this at the moment. So any idea is sort of a worthwhile idea, because we can learn some things from it, whether it succeeds or fail. Um, And it's just such a layered question here. And I would say my overall philosophy of this is it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
And we would get that. It's not solely in person or online. It's both of them. How do we leverage both of them? And the new buzzword around, I guess, is engagement. How do I engage people online? Same thing we're asking in our congregations is, how do I engage the people who are coming to our church? And as a pastor myself, I know I was never satisfied if people came into our church, they snuck through our greeters, they didn't try our coffee, they just sat in service, they just consumed all the content, and then they left and didn't get our free gift on the way out, and nobody actually got their name. I was never content with that, because I always wanted to engage the person and invite them into Jesus's story, and invite them into the life that Jesus promises, into eternity, into discipleship. So we did things along the way to make sure they engaged. And that's my encouragement to pastors right now who are feeling just flooded with, how in the world do I do church online? Is that I sort of want to look at them and say, you're already good at this. You may just need some people to come alongside you and help you do it online. For example, we're good at recruiting greeters to make sure that people get smiled at and get to know their name and don't get lost in the mix. We're good at creating engaging content that preaches the gospel to people. We're good at inviting them into next steps and into community. So even in my mind, and I'd love to know what you think to this, is the two aren't so far removed between online church and in-person church. It's really just the avenues which we invite people to do that. So what do you think? What do you think?
No, I think that it's being able to, you're right. My life philosophy is just winging it, and everybody is winging it right now, and nobody really knows what they're doing, if we're being honest. But being able to to me, winging it doesn't necessarily always mean flying by the seat of your pants, but it also means that you can pivot accordingly, which is, per se another buzzword, is that, all experience does is it gives you confidence, and, confidence, and, being confident in this, and he who began a good work in me shall finish and done to completion, versus, confidence and pride may look, similar kind of in, from an outside point of view. So just because you haven't done it before, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but you have done it in a different way. To your point, you have engaged with the assimilation process to get people plugged into your church. You have engaged with providing positive, happy people, so trying to figure out how to translate those into, a digital experience is definitely a good way to, pivot accordingly, versus just trying to reinvent the wheel. That, the joke is, they didn't have pandemic day in seminary, that wasn't a course you could take. But they have given you other resources that you can utilize and then kind of shape and mold from there. When we were talking a little bit, you were talking about again, this engagement thing, and you made this amazing, beautiful Venn diagram that it took you hours to do. And it's just 3 circles, guys. It's not that 3 circles, a different 3 circles, but it was, the content, the channels, and the community, that's what we consider engagement. And I think so often, nerds like me are focused on those first two, what is the thing we're pushing out, and what channel, what hashtag we're going to use, or whatever. But just the community aspect of what you're talking about is kind of what's missing specifically. So maybe just talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned, how can somebody build community in a digital space? And, we have these cool videos, we have these social media channels. What's a way we could build community in kind of this arena?
Yeah, I love that. And this is, I think I dream about this stuff that we're talking about right now. It's so great. And this is it's going to set apart the church of the future, is is figuring out that how do you encourage community, build community using digital methods. And I can't take credit for the Venn diagram. I'll explain it in a second. But my boss, Daryl Girardier, and Morgan Comer, who I think she's been on here in the past, we kind of sat around and said, okay, what is digital engagement? What does that actually mean? And we were getting ready to lead a staff meeting for all the Brentwood staff on this. And so we were like, well, we need to define what we mean by digital engagement. And that really came down to, if you have those three pieces kind of in the Venn diagram, that sweet spot in the center where all three collide is when you have digital engagement. So the first circle being your channels, which are your digital channels. So if you think, how am I sending my message out digitally? So that could be through your website, that could be YouTube videos, that could be a live stream, that could be Facebook's, Instagram, a whole plethora of options online. So you have your digital channels, then you have your digital content, and that is, what content are you feeding through those channels? And it better be pretty good, because if I'm watching you on my phone or my computer, I'm only one click away from going to something that I like better. So, you know, we're trying to even think through how might we reimagine or restructure how we're getting out the same message of the gospel, you know, through digital content. And then there is the community piece, and I'll talk about that a lot more in a second. But once you have all three, that's when you have digital engagement. Where churches have lived up till now is they've had content and they've had online channels, and they've tried to feed content through those channels, and they've lacked the community part. So I would say we haven't had digital engagement. We've had live streams, and we've had, you know, marketing. And Nona Jones is a great person to follow right now. So she is the head of faith-based partnerships at Facebook. And she's just brilliant right now talking about this. And she's bringing up this idea of community, and not just using social media as social marketing,
Yes.
but using social media for social ministry. And I'm guilty of this too, where I've used it to market my own thing, but I haven't really done it for ministry as a whole. So the way I've kind of joked with you in the past about this is, churches should think less like broadcast television, which is the one person to a whole bunch of people, and there's no dialogue, to we could take some cues from online dating services, which actually bring people together, and they use their technology to bring people into community. And I really think that's a big deal. And we don't even have to bring people to our church buildings anymore. We could bring them together in their small groups through our technology. We could bring them together in community pockets online, or on Facebook groups, or on Reddit groups, or whatever that is, to really create some community online. Tim Keller said, when he was talking about how do you reach a city as a church, and he used this brilliant phrase. He said, be a resident and not a tourist. And so when I think of that, I think, okay, I lived in Myrtle Beach for a long time, and I now live in Nashville, Tennessee. So I get the tourist thing, right? The tourists that come to Myrtle Beach, and all they do is take stuff, and then they leave, and they leave your city in shambles. And listen, I was not ready for that in Nashville. So you go down Broadway Street, and there's bachelorette parties everywhere, and they're doing Lord knows what. And there's these party buses and pedal taverns. And I was like, I'm from Myrtle Beach, but this is blowing my mind, right? And so there's a difference between being a tourist and actually being a resident and living in the city and trying to make the city better. And it's where you live and you work and you play and you meet the needs of people and you serve in the city to make it better, all for the kingdom and in the name of Jesus. And I just think the way we've treated online world is we've said, hey, I'm just going to be a tourist, or I'm just going to show up on Sundays in the online world. I'm going to do my live stream where I do all the talking. And then at the end of it, I'm going to ask you to give. And then we're going to pack everything up. We're going to ship out of town until next Sunday when we roll back into town and do it all over again. And then we've used social media at more like a flyer to just say, come back to the event again. And it's sort of funny. We have to laugh at ourselves that every Saturday you can hop on Instagram or Facebook and look at all the churches, and they're all going to say, we're so excited for church tomorrow. It's going to be the best day of the week. Welcome home banner. We can't wait to see you. And that's not picking. Like, we have to be able to laugh at ourselves about that. Like, we're all just saying, come do our thing, come do our thing, come do our thing. We would never, ever say that the way to plant a church in a new city is show up on Sunday, unpack the show, do all the talking, ask people to give, pack it all up, and roll out of town until the next week. We never say that.
Sure.
But for some reason that we felt that's okay online.
Mm.
Part of that is we needed to pivot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've pivoted. Now it's time for us to advance this ball forward, right? And to take the next step online and actually create some pockets of community. And I'll tell you, the people that are doing this the best, in my opinion, are online gamers. Yep. And like, I literally think we can take some cues from online gamers right now on how to do community online.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that, you have adopted, I grew up in foster care, you like gaming, I like gaming, you're in ministry. We've never physically met face to face, but we have developed a community, and a relationship between you and I just through online.
That's right.
And I think that it can still happen, that you can develop that, taking cues of the interactivity, the back and forth, the dialogue, and in a way, a lot of us log on to Facebook or log on to YouTube or log on to Instagram every day. So we are already, in, maybe not a tourist, but, kind of, we have that favorite place that we go to every time we're in that area,
well,
the difference between a church going, a church, a church expecting people to come versus people going to where people are at.
100%.
And, that's, there's a church, SCBC church, that is doing that well. Goose Creek, Creekside Church, the church in our convention, and they rather than, hey, here's all of our banners and here's all the things that we want you to come to our church, our new church, they decided to, go in the neighborhood and just kind of do, share and say, how can I pray for you? And they grew the church through that way. And so same thing online, being able to do that. So what would you say then? Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Let me jump in here and say this too. So one question we were asking early on is, so right when COVID hit, it was, okay, what do we do? And everybody's freaking out. We asked the question, what would we do if live stream was not an option? So think about that for a second. If when all this went down and the pandemic happened and we couldn't gather physically, thank God we had live stream, because that kept many of us in touch and Facebook and social media. But rewind 20 years back, and if we didn't have any of this, how would you have done church? I think that's a critical question to ask, because when we answer that whatever those answers are is how we should use technology going forward. Let me give you an example. So if we didn't have the ability to care for people in our church, and what would we have done? I think we would have done a lot more of what you just said. We would go house to house. We would have empowered people in our church to take care of their communities all around them, right? Take care of your neighbors, love their neighbors. Hey, you can't invite them to the building anymore, so it's up to you to be on mission and take care of your people. I believe that's one of the greatest gifts that God's given the church right now, is it's giving power back to the people to do ministry and not just rely on the ministers to be the one to do ministry right now. So if online wasn't an option, we would have maybe traveled around town. The pastor might have stopped by to the elders and gave them some material and said, okay, now you need to go take your 10 small group leaders or the 10 families you're responsible for and give them this material and train them up, and then send them into their community to do small groups. and it almost starts sounding like New Testament style church.
There it
It
is,
sounds
man.
like Paul when he writes letters and he says, man, I long to be with you, right? In person's ultimately better. We're not pretending that, but I can't be with you, but I can still train you using the modern technology of his day,
Yeah.
which is the circulating letter.
Yeah.
I think we would have done that. So what I want to invite us to do is to think through, how do I not just live stream, but how do I create systems online that will actually train up people in our church, that then they can train up people. Some examples of this, as I know churches that are doing online kind of like new believer classes or starting points or whatever you want to call them. And they're doing that online, and you sort of get a certificate at the end, and you get, a coach who's checking in with you the whole time and all that. There's a group here at Brentwood, and I love this because it proves that technology is not just for the young, that this group of senior adults meet every Sunday on a Zoom call, and there's more than 60 of them every Sunday that are gathering together on this Zoom call. And I love that. And the pastor didn't create it. The people, kind of took it upon themselves to create it. There's a church in town that we've attended called Emmanuel Nashville, which we're big fans of. And I want to tell you, one of their elders and his wife and kids stopped by our house with a gift for our children because we had attended their kids ministry. And so then we just talked and we hung out, and they invited us over for dinner and to hang out with them. And I was like, that's awesome. And I would love to create digital systems that empower our people to do that, because, man, what can Jesus do with that kind of hospitality as we truly love our neighbors? So when we're asking the question, how can we do online ministry? I think wrestle with, how would you have done it if you couldn't live stream, and then do it.
Yeah. I mean, the difference is it's, the social marketing versus social ministry. Your mindset is towards to ministering, to helping, to serving, to loving, versus trying to promote and do something. I strongly dislike the word marketing because it's so forward and pushing something
Yeah.
that you want somebody to do versus being able to come alongside and help. So I mean, I think that's really good, man. So let's say somebody here, their church, they've just been streaming and that's all they've been doing online. What is a practical step they could take, Matt, to start to engage in social ministry versus and to be able to build communities online versus just doing stuff on Sunday morning?
Yeah, it's great. I would say find some leaders. That's been my go-to response right now. And unless you're a pro at social media and you live in those worlds of Facebook groups and Instagram and YouTube and Twitch, and unless that's where you're comfortable at, my first step is find some leaders and invite some people who are better at this than you to come alongside you and help you do better. I made the joke in front of our staff not too long ago that we just hired a new worship leader. And I said, there's a reason we hired this guy instead of asking our senior pastor to stop preaching and come over and lead worship, right? Because he's good at what he's good at. Our worship leader's good at what he's good at. So let the worship leader and let the pastor do what they're good at while they help one another do what they're not good at, right? And so we get that in all the other roles. For whatever reason, I think pastors feel this pressure that they have to become the experts all of a sudden, and all of a sudden they're feeling like this square peg forcing a round hole, or they're going, wait, what Enneagram am I supposed to be, or what strength finders am I supposed to be a digital person? And I go, wait. Like, let's pause and let's look around and say, who in your congregation, they're probably already there, right? God knew this was coming, so he's probably already put people in your life and around you to say, man, they might be really good at this. For example, soon as this happened here at Brentwood, I started asking around, just saying, all right, who in our churches has big followings on YouTube or Facebook, or, you know, I was not interested in their following. I was interested in who's good at this stuff. And we found out there was one girl at one of the campuses that had 1.3 million subscribers on YouTube. So I said, we have to take her to coffee, because I need to learn some things from her about creating content, using channels, and creating community online. We found out one of the girls on staff has a large Instagram following. So I was like, let's take her to lunch and ask her some questions about how we could do this better. So I don't want to pretend to know all the answers for your congregation. What I want to encourage you to do is start having conversations with your congregation about who's good at this and what they see and how they think they could help keep pushing the ball forward for the kingdom. What would you say?
What would I say? I
Yeah.
would say, you know, I think I was hit by a call a couple weeks ago that where there's just so much digital noise, you know, per se, that, you know, like something like what you said that was impactful to you, that Denise, you know, just mentioned, you know, calling people, being able to leave gifts, you know, at their door, something that is maybe a little bit more physical, is not
Write
necessarily
letters.
writing letters. It's not tied to a specific platform where the answer is not just as solely digital, but the building of community. It can be done in this arena. To what you said, if this happened 50 years ago, if this happened 20 years ago, like, it would be completely like, what would we have done? And so maybe thinking through that would be able to open a fresh mindset on what are maybe some less. So if we're scared, or if we're maybe a little timid about the use of technology, that you don't necessarily have to utilize technology to think of another way to engage people and build community in this kind of arena that we're in, man, and do, you know, social ministry, you know, in a more social way as you can.
Let's not build our buildings online. Let's not build our empires online and just invite people to come to them. Like, I may not be able to create content online like the NFL can.
Sure.
Right? I will never have the budgets the NFL does. There are some churches that are going to blow me away on online content, but nobody better beat me at loving my community.
Amen. Amen.
Right? If God called us to the cities that we're in, and we are the church, the thing the church has done since it was birthed better than anybody was caring for people and loving people and inviting people into a greater story than they're living, and pointing them into community with the Father through the Son by the power of the Holy Spirit. Like, nobody should be beating us at the community aspect of all this. And I love that we're talking about using the digital to push towards the tangible. Man, creating those digital pipelines for leadership that push our leaders to somebody put phone calls or write letters. Like, I love that stuff. And small groups in their home, or dinner parties at their house, or whatever they're comfortable with during this season, man. I think there's a future there.
Absolutely, man. Matt, thanks so much, man, for being a part of this Let's Talk today. You know, obviously you're doing a lot of things. Tell us a little bit more about, you know, you have that Fight for the Future hat on. Tell me a little bit what's that about, and just kind of tell me a little bit more about that, man.
Okay, 2-minute version is that I always had a dream to start a clothing brand that got to speak into a world that my preaching didn't. And what I mean is, there's a certain audience that I got to speak through my preaching, and that's those who would come to church or find it online. But there's so many unbelievers who would never actually come to my church and hear my super well-crafted sermons. Like, no matter how great they were, people didn't hear them. So I thought, man, maybe I could have a chance to have another voice into the world by starting a clothing brand. So did that on the side and kind of put it on pause since we moved to Nashville. And my ultimate dream with that is I use a lot of Japanese inspiration, and Japan is now below the line for being a reach people group. So modern day Tokyo and Japan is an unreached people group. And I would love to have a foothold into that culture through a clothing brand to bring the gospel in. So people are not lacking. People are discouraged, and people have dreams that they give up on. And I want to encourage people to continue to fight for the future that they see. So whether that's a marriage they've given up on, or a faith they've given up on, or a freedom from an addiction or a debt that they've given up on, I hope to just inspire and infuse some hope that to keep fighting for that.
Amen. And you are continuing to model the building the community and reaching people where they're at versus, as you said, trying to build your kingdom and make people come to you.
Yep.
We as
Go into
Christians
people.
call into people. Thanks so much, Matt, for being a part of that. We are so appreciative of you. Next week, guys, you will not want to miss the season finale of Let's Talk. We have Kenny Lamb, North Carolina Baptist worship consultant. Matt Friedman considers this guy the guru of all things worship, and this is a great way to end our season of Let's Talk. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks so much for being a part of it, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk.